He was crushed for our sins. Some translations from Isaiah say he was crushed for our infirmity, namely the infirmity of sin. This past year, we have been crushed by another infirmity, namely COVID-19, an infirmity that has crushed our country and our world, our homes and our friendships, our families, our work, every aspect of life, crushed under the weight of this pandemic, physically, emotionally, with increases in addiction and mental illness and suicide and depression, conflicts in the home, crushed financially, where, as always happens in this world, the poor suffer disproportionately to everyone else, as do the minorities, crushed because of this pandemic. There's only 2 days of the year where the church intentionally does not celebrate Mass. Today, we celebrate a liturgy. The bread and wine are not consecrated. It is not the Mass. And Holy Saturday until, of course, the Easter Vigil. 2 days where there is no Mass. But a year ago, you went several weeks without being able to be present for the Mass, as Father Scott and I celebrated them privately, alone, even having to use different chalices, he and I, lest both of us get infected from the use of the same chalice if we had come down with COVID-19, and therefore not been available to you for some weeks. Crushed. I remember the day that it was announced that there would be no further public Masses. It was a Friday. I was in my office. It was 12 o'clock. I was on the computer checking email when Father Dahlin's email popped up and told us so. I quickly ran over. Father Scott was celebrating the noon Mass. I told him, this is the last Mass that anyone can attend, and we don't know until when. And when he made that announcement, I stayed in the back of the church and I watched as fellow parishioners and myself wept. What's happening? What will happen? What's going on? What awaits us? Crushed because of this pandemic, crushed in so many ways. We have been crushed with Jesus this past year, but he was crushed for something far worse than COVID-19, namely our sins. The Gospel of John refers repeatedly to, quote, the Jews. There's a real tension with, quote, the Jews in that Gospel more than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because at the time that Matthew, Mark, and Luke were written, Catholics, the Christians, the apostles and their successors, and those who follow Christ worshiped in the temple on Saturdays, on the Sabbath, with their fellow Jewish brothers and sisters. They were Jewish, and they worshiped on Saturday. But between the time that Luke's gospel was written and John's gospel, the Jewish community recognized that these Nazarenes, as they were called, or followers of the way, believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and therefore couldn't be Jewish anymore, and they expelled them from the synagogue. Now Christians were experiencing persecution not just from the Romans, but from their own family and friends. Their own fellow parishioners were turning them in to be tortured and killed. And it was in that context of great tension that John's gospel was written. We know that it was not the Jews who crucified Jesus, nor the Romans. That would be to escape and deny our culpability. It was for our sins that he was crushed, pierced for our offenses. Yet Jesus tells us that unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it bears no fruit. We have to, in a sense, crush it into the ground and bury it. And only then can it bear fruit. As we celebrate this Good Friday, we hear the words of John's Gospel where Jesus says, "As it is, my kingdom is not of this world. It is not of here." The injustices, the killing, the racism, the violence, the political tensions, the conflict and scandals within our own church constantly remind us his kingdom is not here. If it were, things would be very different, both at his judgment, as Jesus said, as well as today. His kingdom is not here. But that is not a cause for us to grow depressed and give up, but rather a call to action, to recognize that his kingdom is not of this world, but of heaven. And so we must live for that kingdom while we're here on earth. The conflict, the contradiction, if we do so, will be glaring and real. But we must be willing to recognize that in suffering, in injustice, in economic instability, in the face of racism and violence and tensions and scandal, his kingdom is not of this world, but we will live for the one to which his kingdom belongs. And we will not only live for it, we will suffer for it, and we will die for whatever comes ahead. Whatever persecutions, whatever injustices, we will walk with Jesus carrying that heavy load. And it's important to recognize that when we carry a heavy burden on our backs, we can't jump to here and run to there and skip there. We're slow in moving. We're not quick to react like Peter, the only one in the gospel who took the sword and slashed the ear of one of the soldier's servants. Peter was quick to react, appearing very zealous. And yet he was the first to deny Jesus 3 times, and the only one to deny him. There are a lot of Peters among us too. We can appear very zealous and quick to react, only to end up denying the Lord in some other way. If we carry the burden with Christ, we're not quick. We can't be fast, but slow and steady and constant and sure, just as he carried that cross on his back and fell and got up. And when he couldn't, he let someone else carry it for him, a sinner. And in that humiliation, he got up still and followed him. Jesus followed the sinner who carried his cross. Slow and steady, no quick reaction, staying the course, following in the footsteps of Christ. He was crushed for our sin. We have been crushed this past year for something different. But as we recognize day in and day out from scandals and headlines that this world is not of Jesus' kingdom, we are strengthened all the more to live that truth in how we treat one another and how we follow the Lord, slow and steady, secure and humble, one step at a time. Suffering, persecution, illness, poverty, injustice, and death, with fidelity, with love and compassion, because his kingdom is not of this world, and neither is ours.